This is a really low-key kind of open session, and what I wanted to do was start with each panelist and ask a question, and then we'll open it up. If there's an awkward silence, I'll fill it in and ask my own question, but please, I don't want to make this the Leeva hour, okay? So help me out. I'd first like to talk to Dr. Elaine Kim. Elaine, wonderful film. Have any of you seen the original Slaying the Dragon? Okay, Netflix. No, it's not on Netflix. Oh, it is. Sorry, this is like academic versus Hollywood. No, okay, I am an academician. That may not seem like it, but I am. And I've showed it a lot of times, and this is like part 2, right? Elaine, I'd like to know your inspiration. So it's been about 20 years since G made this film, and I'd like to know, was there a moment in your life where you're teaching? Of course you are. And some moment came into your class where you thought, I could do this. I know you could do it all. She's a researcher, a prolific writer, a publisher, inspiration. She's won many awards. So Elaine, did you just want to add more to your list? And so what inspired you to make part 2?
Well, actually, Slaying the Dragon was made, it's a 16mm film, and it was made in 1988, sponsored by this nonprofit Asian women's organization that I belong to called Asian Women United of California. And we had a grant of $300,000 at that time, which is equivalent to about $800,000 today. It's really a really generous grant to do that film. But we couldn't really get a grant to do a sequel. And I thought it was important to do a sequel because I noticed that my students never heard of any of the movies that were in Slaying the Dragon. They kind of got the idea, but for them, William Holt, Marlon Brando, they all run together. You know, they didn't know who was who. They had never heard of Susie Wong. And Susie Wong is pretty central to that Slaying the Dragon. So then we thought, we really need to ask the question of whether or not things have really changed a lot and how they've changed now. So we just actually used a computer and a hand video camera and then Final Cut Pro and Handbrake, you know, to make this, and that's why it looks like that, because I never made a film before, and I was kind of trying to learn on the fly, and so, but I really made it. We really made it for a classroom. That's why it's 30 minutes long, and it also has this little 10 or 12-minute director's footnotes on it, which are like little segments. Like there's one on transracial adoptees, because if you were a transracial adoptee and you saw that scene where Lucy Liu hugs her blonde father, you might not think it was so surprising. So we wanted to make, or why is Christine Gambino singing Jingle Bells when in the Philippines there's no snow? Or what about Asian popular culture, Korean drama, Bollywood cinema? And what about African American assistance and support of Asian American popular culture? So there are different little segments that are made for teachers to go into questions. Because I know that everything in the kitchen sink is in this film, because we tried to have South Asians, Filipinos, Koreans, Vietnamese, everybody in there, and then we tried to make sure there were men and women, queer and straight, everything. But for a classroom, we were hoping that it would be possible for people to just stop it and discuss it. And then, actually, all the proceeds for this video go to Asian Women United to make another video or another book. So we've been doing that all along. So Slaying the Dragon got royalties and stuff that we are used to making waves and making more waves.
Well, just this quick follow-up question, since a lot of you have not seen Slaying the Dragon. It is about stereotypes of Asian American women on screen. Usually they're depicted as dragon women or peasant, women, strong wives, very submissive. I'd like just to briefly ask you about this second version, which I love, and especially the extras if you buy the DVD, to give proceeds back. What are the 3 central themes that you think we should take away from the new stereotypes of Asian Americans? And I love, by the way, your music fusion as well into it. But are there 3 basic themes that you think we should be looking for as we're looking at these stereotypes and images?
I think that one is that Hollywood Hollywood's treatment of Asian American women hasn't changed too much. And, but where it has changed, it's kind of what I would call deracination, which is that thing where you pretend that the Asian woman is actually a white woman and it's just a replaceable part. And that doesn't mean that anybody wants to see a very Chinesey woman who's wearing a cheongsam and speaking only Chinese or any of that, or whose character is all about just being Chinese. But it's just that it would be great if there was a, sort of a realistic representation. And the second thing is domestication. I do think it struck me a lot that when there was a lot of Asian and Latino immigration in California, it didn't seem like a coincidence that Aladdin, Pocahontas, Mulan, all these films set long ago have nothing to do with the current situation in China or the Middle East, where there are all these sort of cutie characters in them, came out. So I think there was that kind of domestication. But the main thing is that Asian American production is really, I hope, it seems to be very fertile and very diverse, and really there's so much going on all the time that even if you do something right now, you still can't catch everything that's happening right now, or next year. So anything that we do in 2011 may be pretty obsolete by 2012. So the great thing is people can make their own YouTube commentaries or do whatever on it.
Thank you. Wow. Lynn, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I have like 18 questions in my head, so I'll just narrow it down to one.
Okay.
Can I ask you about this notion of the ambiguous Asian-American? In other words, on screen we'll see, a person, the protagonist, who, like yourself, who is portraying a character. It's not necessarily Chinese or Korean or Japanese, you're just Asian. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So is this more for the notoriously 20,000 years of Asian countries hating each other, and now when we're in America, we should all love each other, be Asian American, so that we could, the Japanese will come, the Chinese Americans will come, etc.? Or is it more for the mainstream audience to have it more appealing? I was just curious what your thoughts would be, especially as an actor.
I would say that today, with a lot of the films that are being made, I think people are trying to consciously steer away from stories that have already been told. So, they don't want to repeat another story about somebody whose parents have come from another generation and the struggle with them. So they're trying to do something new, so they don't want to repeat themselves. And I think that's probably why you don't see any of their cultural background addressed in certain things. But as far as, I'm thinking specifically about television and that sort of thing, there's very few things written for women in general where there's a strong character or any sort of depth. So usually it's too much to ask for them to be Asian and intelligent and have a backstory and all these other complicated feelings. So that's what I think about that.
That's a great point. The depth and the complexity, which these roles that you probably are looking for, do you purposely choose roles then that have more of the ambiguity? Or do you find more specific roles as Chinese/Asian American women?
To be quite honest, I don't really have a choice in the matter.
I wish you did.
Yeah, I wish I did too. Usually it's just, what's offered to me and it's as simple as what works out with my schedule and if I have the time and if the timing is right. But, there are definitely projects that I've said no to in the past that I feel like if I've already told that story, I don't need to repeat it again. It depends on a lot of different factors.
Thank you. Sheetal, thank you for coming out as well.
Thank you for having us. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Never mind. We're good. Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you here to speak from the audience as well. We talk about, in the classroom, we talk about tensions. In relationships, there's tensions. One partner wants one thing and the other partner wants the other, and you're trying to balance or strike a balance. when it comes to acting, you want to practice your craft. This is your passion. This is what you want to do. And at the same time, we know, as we've been seeing, the film, that there are stereotypes, and there's a certain amount of roles that are available. How do you balance this tension of really wanting to practice your craft, have that depth, have that complexity, have the richness of that wine? As it ages, it gets awesome. And balancing with, well, the role may not be the one I want, or.
Well, I don't do roles I don't want to do. So, if there's something that's presented to me that I don't connect to in whatever way, I'm not going to do it. And I know a lot of people that, obviously have different perspectives on that, and I respect all of them. But for me, at this point in my life, I just make a very conscious choice to only do things that excite me, or that are challenging, or whatever. There's lots of elements. Like sometimes I want to work with another actor, sometimes I want to work with this director, or I want to do, or I'm happy to do one little scene because I love that scene. So there's a variety of reasons why I'll do something. But if there's something that I read that for me doesn't connect, but it will connect to 100 other people, I feel like one of those 100 people should do it, because we all know how hard it is to make a movie. And if everyone isn't there doing it 100%, then there's an issue. So I only do things that I am very excited about. And that would be different at different points in my life.
Okay, at this point in your life.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious, what is your criteria? Like, in your head, so you're getting a role, and is it because you're working with John Cho, or is it, you're working with this amazing director? Do you have a criteria in your head?
It starts with the script.
Okay. The story? The story.
And then obviously, you read a script and you just kind of want to see if the script itself is a story that I want to be a part of. And then if that's a yes, then it's really, who would I be working with? How long will I be doing this? Do I want to spend 2 months with these people, with this character? So it's, again, all we have is our time. So where do you want to spend it?
How about you, Lynn? Do you have a criteria in your head?
Very similar. It usually has to do with who I'm working with, has to do with the story. There's been plenty of times I've read something and I know right away, this is not right for me. It doesn't hurt to go in and audition or read or meet with somebody and see what happens. And in those cases, a lot of the time I feel like rejection is protection. But there's so many different factors, and it varies from time to time. 1 year I might need health insurance, and that is a big reason why you would choose to do a commercial that you probably wouldn't want to be associated with normally, but it's a year of health insurance, so you do what you have to do. There's a lot of different factors, like Sheetal was saying.
Okay. I have 18,000 questions in my head, but I don't want to make this the Leeva hour. I'd like to open it up. If any of you in the audience have a question that you've been pondering, that you've been thinking about. Yes! I'll do like I do in class. Since I don't know your name, I'll just say woman in the glasses.
One of my African American colleagues has said that he thought Grey's Anatomy, that drama, was the only drama that he knew of that had transcended racism. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, if you're familiar with the drama.
Okay, so Grey's Anatomy, the ABC show that transcends racism and color, with Sandra, with etc. Thoughts? Elaine? Lynn? Sheetal?
I don't watch the show, but
I haven't really watched the show, but my students don't. My students think that Sandra Oh's character is kind of a stereotype of the driven Asian straight-A student who's cold-blooded and all of that. I haven't seen it, so I don't know, but I do know that has some great roles in HBO, like on Our List and other things where she's hilarious, and very multi-talented. And I tend to think that her HBO performances gave her more room, and in independent cinema gave her a bit more room than, of course, she might have gotten in commercial TV or movies, I suspect.
Sheetal, would you like to?
I don't watch the show, so I don't feel like I should.
Did you have any comments about, what did you think?
Well, I guess I find it better than many of the ones that I watched, and I think that Sandra Oh does follow that stereotype to a degree, but she also steps outside of it, I think. So, I was wondering what you would
I'll
think.
say in general terms, I mean, just this idea of stereotypes for me gets a little dicey and a little dangerous, because I think you can certainly say that about almost every character, about every race in the history of time. So, and I also think it's a very personal thing for a lot of people. I think some people watch it and have a different reaction to different characters versus others. And so one person may feel that about Sandra's character, and 100 others might be so happy because they see themselves in her in a different way. Or all the other characters in that show. I do know enough that I know that it's very diverse. I know that the writing seems to be really great and people really love it. And so, the fact that they're on network television getting the opportunity to play a lead character is exciting. And knowing the little bit that I know about Sandra, I think it's great that I think she's added a lot to it. And I know other friends of mine that have been on TV shows that might have started a role and originally written a certain way, but then once you're on, you get a lot of say. And people really want you to bring in your other layers. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that once you have the pipeline or the opportunity, let's make it, more. And I think that a lot of people try to do that.
Thank you. I mean, I think this has a lot to do with what we call small victories. I'd like to know if you had any small victories. You just said, acting's bread and butter. You need to eat, you need to live, you need to work. Have you had a role which you weren't so thrilled about? You took it thinking that this was going to go in one direction and it went in another. But upon taking the role and you couldn't get out of it, did you change it in a way that you believed that was your small victory? Like this was something that you changed within the realm of what you could change?
Thankfully, I've never taken a role that I've regretted. But I was just going to say that something that would be a small victory for me, and something that I see changing in the face of television today, is you see more and more shows like Lost, like Hawaii Five-0. I'm naming all the shows with Daniel Day Kim. He's a good friend of mine. He's a wonderful man. But shows like that where you have more than one character of a certain race. I remember John and I actually did a pilot that we were in with Sheetal years and years ago, and one of the things that we were so thrilled about was that there was just more than one token Asian on the show. And it was very exciting to us, because back in the day you'd go into an audition and you'd find out that they cast someone as Asian. You're like, well, there goes my chances of getting in this. But that's not the case anymore. You see shows, and I know for a fact that Daniel, actively tries to get as many specifically Asian Americans on that show, just to reflect the population in Hawaii. So it's working. There's a lot of people on that show who are Asian American, so I see that as a small victory.
John Cho once told me that someone offered him a horrible role, and he said, "Oh, no thanks, I don't want to do that role." And then the director said, "Why not?" And then he said, "Well, it's kind of this and that," and then the director changed it. And then he did ultimately play that role. So he said, it was not that the director deliberately made it into some kind of a caricature role, but he really didn't know. And that was an intervention that John could make at that time. Although he also added that the guy should have known.
Well, what's interesting about, I'm thinking about that, and I'm going back to that show that Sheetal and I were in with John. It was called The Singles Table, and I remember John likes to do a lot of improv. I'm just talking about John Cho all the time. Daniel or John, this is the Asian American men panel. We're not even here. But something that happened on set was, he likes to improv a lot, and he was doing this thing where he was imitating his father, and in one of the last takes, he did it with an accent. And you could hear from Video Village, which is where all the directors and producers and everyone sits, kind of far away from the set, you could hear laughter. And he came right up to me right after that, and he said, "Did I go too far? What should I do? They were laughing, they're probably gonna use that take. And did I just misrepresent myself, and now they're going to cast a guy who has an accent if they end up using this. He was really, torn up about it, and, I didn't know John very well at the time and was like, I don't know, John. I don't know what to do. And I think what ended up happening was he just went up to them and was like, don't use that last take. And that was that.
I think we have more power than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know Lynn very well, and I think we're both very outspoken. And when we're in a situation where something comes up that doesn't feel right, we'll generally let people know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, what is your reaction to Slaying the Dragon Reloaded?
I have a lot of, I watched it and I had a lot of feelings about a lot of those pieces.
Was there one particular thing that resonated with you?
I feel like sometimes we end up talking about the same thing over and over again. And I feel like in order to move forward, we have to talk about what's happening now and obviously know the history, but take where we are now and really now move forward. And I don't think it's necessarily helpful to constantly specify, specific, like the fact that this panel exists is exciting and it needs to happen, but you want to get to a point where you don't need a panel like this. Because
Correct.
You want to be so integrated in the mainstream that you don't need a specific thing where you talk about this. Hopefully. I know we're not there yet, so you need to. So you find a support group and you can find a way to help each other break new ground. But I think really the most important thing is about telling our own stories and having the power, telling our own stories then, having the voice to do it, supporting every other filmmaker that does that. And when you have the chance and you have the power, cast people that you feel should play that part, and look out for each other in that way so that you can even the playing ground a little bit.
Wow, if I was a director, I would hire you right now. Lynn, do you have a question?
Well, I definitely feel like, I agree with Sheetal about saying that, I feel like ever since I started acting, which was a long, long time ago, these stereotypes have remained in my head. And there are some years where I definitely see it a lot more than others. I remember, like, a few months ago, I went in on an audition, and it was like accent, kung fu, and I haven't seen one of those in years. And when I got it, it was like, it was so depressing. And I felt like, oh, have we moved backwards again? But it was just one audition out of many that were nothing like that. So, I do think we have to focus on what's going on currently and the fact that, Asian Americans on YouTube and on the internet are exploding and leading, that's where we should put our focus. And, film festivals like this that exist, that foster this kind of community, that's what we have to put more of our energy into making sure that everyone knows about it, because ultimately we need to reach as many people as possible.
Agreed.
I was just wondering, I noticed that this audience laughed at the right moments in saving face. So when you were talking in the Chinese American English, which was a little bit of Mandarin with a lot of English, and when the mom responded, just to one thing, the way she did, and about Connie Chung, that everybody here laughed, and people don't necessarily laugh because they don't necessarily get that, And I wonder if you think there's going to be a time, because I think audiences are important, like you guys are important and the directors are important, but also I have a lot of hope in the audience, and I might be really naive about this, but I think my students are very sophisticated critics. They expect a lot, they know a lot, and they want a lot. And I'm wondering if you have many thoughts about that audience. Everybody poo-poos the Asian American audience, including the marketing people I know. They say, oh, well, we don't have to direct anything to them because they won't necessarily go and see a film the way a Latino audience or the way an African American audience might. But do you think that the time will come when that critical mass could, that kind of very appreciative critical mass could really make a difference, or is it very far off?
You know, I really don't know the answer to that. That's something that I think about, and people in the industry that I talk about a lot, trying to figure out how to get our audiences to support our films, because, you know, a lot of, you know, if you export a movie to China, a lot of people don't want to see their Asian faces speaking English. And you know, it's funny with that scene in Saving Face, the one that we're at the dinner table, that was one of the scenes where, like, we hardly rehearsed. That was just me not knowing what I was doing. And I think that maybe the reason people relate to it is because a lot of people speak like a 4-year-old in Mandarin, like I did.
No,
but you know, if you see your story reflected, I think you're going to relate to it. That said, that's something I want to know too, of figuring out how to get people to support you, because you know, even my family are like, oh, well, we'll just download it. but this is supporting your daughter, and they're like, oh, no, we'll download it and we'll give it to your uncle, and he'll burn. Yeah, 80. Don't worry about it. It's all fine. They don't seem to get it.
Oh my God, that's funny. Questions? Do we have? Yes, right here in the front.
I'm an old American, and I'm obviously not Asian-American or any Asian. But I just wanted to say how much I appreciate these 2 young actresses, because it reminds me of the time in the early 60s when we were fighting for civil rights, and now the young people, they say, what civil rights? You know, and I think if you've gotten to that level, it's absolutely thrilling. And I think to be portrayed as a nerd and a genius is not a bad thing. And I kind of like a couple of those in my family.
I agree. Thank you for your comment. I mean, we really have come a long way. I shouldn't say we in the actor perspective, but we have come a long way, and that's what Elaine is showing, is we have come a long way. However, there are new kind of generalizations and stereotypes about Asian American women that they have to overcome as well. Yeah.
Okay, I hope I said this right.
We'll help you, no worries.
So when you say, like, oh, you go into Hollywood, you go into Hollywood and then they say, oh, Latino audience might not act this way, or African American audience. The Latino audience, African, I mean, I think it's the same issue. So I feel like when you say that, you kind of still give the power to Hollywood, to white Hollywood. So how come you don't think the Latin Africa, how come you don't think those unite? And my other question is, there's really no way to define progress, like what you said, this is really circular. So what do you define as progress? Like what character would you go, okay, that's a good character, we're making way now? Like what?
Okay, so let's start with Elaine, and then we'll do the progress part too then. Thank you.
The thing about the Latino and African American audiences was what I heard that marketers say, that there is an African American movie market that will go and see films with African American actors or stories in them, and that there is that kind of audience in the Latino community, but there is none in the Asian community. And they were saying, I remember they were saying, well, Tiger Woods, you know, we don't have to worry about the Asian audience when trying to market Nikes with a new golfer, but we'll just do that for African Americans because Asian buyers will buy whatever white buyers buy. You know, the marketers were saying that. And then, so that's what I meant by that. And then the other question was about, well, I don't know. I think that that more and more, if doors can open, so more and more good scripts written by excellent writers and also directors like Alice Wu and Mira Nair, and if there are more opportunities for them to do more stuff, more different people, and also if the democratization of the media does occur so that these sort of internet and YouTube, I don't know what the future for that is, but when more people are able to express themselves in the media, I think it's that's the really good sign. There isn't any one representation that would be the one that we all say that's the way to do it, because, you know, like in a way, Saving Face is a very Chinese film. It's got all kinds of Chinese identity things in it, but it has a lot of other things going for it as well, you know, so very diverse possibilities, I think.
Progress, when you were talking, the words that that were flashing through my brain were probably opportunity. I went on a Broadway audition just a few weeks ago, and it was specifically for an Asian woman, and it was so well written and would have been a dream role for anyone. And I went to the audition, and I was like number 75 on the sign-in sheet, and this was just LA casting. You know, they were casting everywhere, and you know, for me that was just a moment of like, yes, I'm grateful for this opportunity, but I wish I had this, you know, once a week, not once every 6 months. And that varies, actually. You know, some years I feel I do have a lot more opportunity, and it just depends. You know, it might have something to do with the age range I'm in now. You know, definitely when I was younger, and I could play a student, that those opportunities were there a lot more. But in terms of progress, I hope that, you know, I don't mind if there's this stereotype of a nerd or dragon lady or, I mean, I mind it, but I don't mind as long as there's a lot of them and we're seeing them all at once, and not just, you know, one role that comes and everyone's fighting for it at once. That's what upsets me.
Or a dragon lady plus a lot of other, like a lot of diverse, different possible.
Yeah, exactly. Not just like 12 dragon ladies in one.
That would be exciting though. No.
I would also just say, I think for me, the biggest frustration is, if you want to talk about mainstream, right? I think the point is everyone's saying, how do we get everything integrated so that everything is mainstream, whatever minority it is, when we talk about Asian, Latin, you know, African American. And I think what it comes down to is you see these studios that are run by primarily white men that are making decisions for a population of people that are very diverse. And in their heads, they think that we will not go see movies unless it's reflected by what they put in there. So they're casting people that they think people want to go watch. Now, I don't think that we are silly enough to not go see a movie if it's going to be good, if it doesn't have a white male or a white female or whatever as the two leads. I think they need to know that. I think we need to tell them. I think we need to show them, by the way, what movies we support, what movies we ask them to keep making. Because at the end of the day, if the movie's good, I really don't think you're going to care if it's a black woman, a white woman, an Asian woman, a Latin woman, because hopefully they're just good. And that's what matters. That, for me, would be the biggest progress. When you see the list that studios have every time there's a movie that's being produced, a big movie, they'll have a list of what actors they're thinking about for it. Five on the short list and the longer list. And there are very few minority women reflected on that. You know, they think there's like 3 or 4 bankable stars that, sure, there's like maybe 5 that can actually definitely bring in an opening weekend, you know, big movie stars, but there's like 5. After that, really, you're not going to go see a movie unless you want to see that movie. So we need to all really be more, I think, empowered and realize that we do have a choice and we do need to support the movies we want to see. And we need to basically write to them, talk to them, every opportunity we get, you know, to show them that it's not about, we're not scared. Like they think they're scared to put someone of color as a lead because they think you won't go see it. And I think we're smarter than that. So that, to me, would be the biggest progress.
Which resonates to our opening film, which was one of the first featured couples that were Asian American in a love interest, and we were trying to scratch our heads. Brian and Dan and I were like, when was the last time we saw a healthy relationship between an Asian American couple on screen? That's a head scratcher. You try it.
I thought Saving Face was, I mean, and then that brings another story of getting
Right.
straight. Like, I thought Saving Face was a loving couple.
Absolutely.
That wasn't brought up either. So it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many.
Yeah, one in how many, right? That was 2004. Yeah, it's a great point. How about let's have some representation in the back. Yeah, ooh, way in the back, with 4 fingers in the air. Yeah, I saw you.
This is for the 2 actresses. What are you currently working on?
Well, Sheetal and I earlier in the summer have finished a movie called Yes, We're Open, directed by Rich Wong, written by H.P. Mendoza, that will have a healthy Asian-American couple in it. So I finished that. I just finished the sequel to Surrogate Valentine, which is the centerpiece film tomorrow. And Surrogate Valentine is actually going to be on video on demand November 1st. And you'll be able to, that is wonderful that you'll be able to access this film with another, well, I wouldn't call them a couple, but an Asian male lead and a female lead who like each other, and you know, it's going to be all across the country. You'll be able to access it on Netflix, and that's exciting.
And it won an award too. Sorry.
Yes. Oh yes, last night we won an award. We won the grand jury prize. That's progress.
Yes, did this movie with Lynn, which I'm very excited about. It's really fun. And then I did a couple other movies. I did this one movie called The Wisdom Tree, where I play a neurologist who saves the world. Very important.
Weren't you a doctor? You're a doctor.
I played a doctor,
wow.
yes. I played a neurologist, yeah.
Awesome.
And it's very sci-fi, new age, really interesting. One of those scripts where I had to read it a few times because I didn't get it. And I was like, whew, okay, let me figure this out. And that was exciting. And then I did a movie called Rain, which is a really intense movie that we shot with Kimberly Jensen's the director, and Jack Green, who's Clint Eastwood's DP from Unforgiven and several other movies, came and shot it with us with his crew because he loved the script so much. And I play a refugee that has an encounter with the Marines that just is kind of a human story about war that you don't necessarily see that much, which I'm really proud of. And then I have a movie out right now called Three Veils that's doing the festival circuit, and we're really happy. It's been winning Best Film at almost every festival we've been to, which is great, and it will be out later this year.
Three Veils, okay. All right, let's see, the woman right here in the middle with your, yeah, you.
So in the documentary, Elaine, you talked about the browning of faces and the whitening of character, and that's something that I'm really interested in discussing in regards to a multiracial, or this representation of a multiracial, I guess, like cast, while the actors are still like, while we don't really interrogate the power of whiteness. So I was wondering if y'all could just like talk about like how to have a movie that not is only multiracial in character, but also includes like that, I guess, kind of challenges like whiteness. Sorry, that was inarticulate.
No, it was, I got stuck on the y'all. I'm like, oh, tell you what.
Well, I'm thinking about a few projects in the last couple of years where they were specifically casting for actresses and actors who are Hapa. One of them is at the film festival, Knots, directed by Michael Kang and written and starring Kimberly Rose Walter. And I just love that, you know, there are these films that exist where they're actually talking about what it's like to grow up Hapa, and not just shoving somebody like, I don't even know her name, the woman from Kristen, anyone? Superman? Is it? Oh, yeah, Kristen Krug. You know, in a role and saying that she's, or Lindsay Price, you know, this has happened. I remember growing up watching TV and them saying like, she's Asian American, her parents are both Asian, and I'm like, well, that's not right. So, you know, lately I have been seeing projects that are specifically about people who come from multiracial backgrounds, and I love that. It's less opportunity for me, but I'm glad that it's happening. But I don't think that answered your question. That was your question.
Does it help, I hope?
Yeah, it definitely helps.
Awesome. Sir, in the middle. I'll get you in a second.
I believe it's Greg Toya. So I'm an educator like yourself, and much like in entertainment, educators face the stereotype of not being leaders. And I see the two of you as really being leaders in groundbreaking roles and showing the complexity of Asian American women in roles. We talk a lot about mentorship because there's like 1% of Asian Americans are presidents of institutions. And so my question is about mentorship. And so do you have mentors in the industry that you go to when you get a script or you want to talk about your craft? And then recognizing that I see you as groundbreakers, are you often the mentors for those coming through? And so talk about the pipeline and mentorship in the field.
I will say that when I was starting out, and I moved to New York, I went to NYU when I was 18, and I was in an amazing acting program. And then when I graduated, and I had the best experience ever, and then I graduated, and I was really surprised at the fact that all this stuff was coming up, all these questions, all these stereotypes, all these little boxes that they want to put you in. I didn't know the business side of it. So I didn't realize that me looking a certain way was going to be a thing. Like when you're in school, you just do the parts that you're working on, and that's all that should really matter. And it was merit-based, let's say. And now we're in an industry that is as far from merit-based as you can get. And so I had nobody that was having a similar struggle when I was first starting. There was maybe 5 of, South Asian Americans working at the time. And so I unfortunately made really poor decisions and got thrown in some terrible situations, and found in that time to find some really great friends that were also just actors that, you kind of grew up in this industry together. That for me became my pipeline of just support, because it's really hard to find anyone that really understands what you're going through, which is why I make a point, actually, not that I have the answers, but I do mentor and I do speak all the time to kids. And I have several mentors that I'm in a program that I do this for. And I wish that I had even anybody I could call and say, what do you do about this? Because it is really hard. And I think that comes from just also the fact is, we just got here, this immigrant community. We're the first generation that's kind of grown up and are now dealing with issues that our parents, obviously, they're not doing what we're doing, So for me, it's really important to have a support staff and a support system is what I mean, actually. And so for me, the people I go to are my friends that I respect. And I do think it's really important to make it easier for anyone else that's going through this.
I don't know if I'd call it specifically mentorship. I don't know if we have officially labeled it as that, but I remember that when I first started acting, I was living in New York, and it felt very much like the other Asian American actors that I was auditioning alongside, that we were very much against one another. That, because it was all for one role, and, we just wouldn't talk to each other. We weren't friends. We were just like, I hope you don't get it.
Survivor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're not in this to make friends. And that was like just the general vibe, but that also could have been because I was very young and naive. But I did find, when I first moved to Los Angeles, it was right after Saving Face, and actually San Diego this film festival was one of the first places where I got to meet all of these actors who I had watched. I met Dustin Nguyen, I met the entire cast of Better Luck Tomorrow, and in the years that have followed, through film festivals like this one, and just, living in the same area, and we see each other all the time, we've become such close friends that, they're the ones that I turn to get advice about the industry or about scripts I'm considering, or projects to work on with one another. A lot of the times we want to work with people we know and people we trust, which is why I've worked on 3 projects with Sheetal. Actually, we're about to do another one too. We're not going to talk about that. It's still in the works. But things like this come up because we've created this community for ourselves, and part of that, I don't know if I would officially consider myself a mentor, but whenever somebody new is coming into the industry and they want to talk to me about it or want to work with me, I don't consider myself really an expert. I just consider myself somebody who's done this a lot, but I feel like I learn a lot from people who are new to this industry just as much as I feel like it's very reciprocal. So, yeah.
Thank you. There was a question. Yes, right over here.
I wanted to, I guess, backtrack to when we were talking about this explosion of alternative media and YouTube, and I think that that's great. But does it set up this dichotomy of alternative media versus Hollywood? And is it problematic that for me as an Asian American woman, when I turn on the TV or I see a big Hollywood film, I am not going to see myself represented? Or as the film Slaying the Dragon Reloaded was saying, is the audience going to be in on the joke if that's happening? And so I'm wondering, do you find that problematic at all, that we have to kind of hunt for these movies and they're not reaching the same audience level that a mainstream, quote, Hollywood film will reach? And do you think that you touched on it briefly about the CEOs and who they think are going to be relatable, but do you think that Hollywood will ever sort of catch up to what we're seeing in alternative media?
I think they have already. I know a couple people who have fostered deals with major networks just based on the sheer number of their YouTube subscribers that wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise. It's funny, like on reality TV, I feel like is one of the most colorblind places where you can just see people on cooking shows, creating designs. I mean, the fashion industry, there are so many designers out there who are Asian, who they don't put Asian designer before their name, and that's the place where I would like us to get to. But I think that those opportunities are arising because the whole new media thing is so new, and that's why it's called new media, and people don't really know exactly how to make it work. So right now is a good time to keep on going with that, so that people are paying attention. People are paying attention.
The new media is like the wild, wild west right now, and everyone talks about it in those terms, in terms of the big circles, the Hollywood, whatever you want to call them. And at the end of the day, they just want to make money, right? At the end of the day, the only color they want to think about is green. So if you can come up with a project that you feel like you can represent your voice and have control, and feel like you can only do that in the opportunity of something you create yourself, and then you create a platform where you can show them how many people love it, that, I guarantee you, if you can do it on your own and put it on YouTube and you get the amount of views and comments and whatever, that, by the way, you take that package to a studio and they see you have a built-in audience, they will love it because half of their work is done. So, it's one of those things where they just want to make money. So if you have something that's proven, that has it already, that you might not have had the opportunity to do if they were involved, or they might not have bought it, do it yourself and then show them. Because they are absolutely paying attention, like Lynn said. They're watching all of it. Because and a lot of them are developing their own web series and outlets, that are conjoining. How like every big studio, like Warner Brothers created Warner Independent. Fox did Fox Searchlight. So each one has their independent arm. They're also creating their new media arm. So they all know that there's a lot of money to be made. They're still trying to figure out how, and so we're all figuring it out together, but they are absolutely paying attention.
I agree that it's like the wild, wild west, and it is hard to say what the outcome will be, but clearly, like with sports, only a very, very few will ever make it. A very, very few will get enough hits and be able to support themselves while they're doing this new media stuff. So we can't underestimate how tough it is. And also, we always talk about how lots of Asian Americans are doing things on YouTube and on new media, but then a lot of times the audience is all Asian American. Nobody's watching it. Well, some people are watching, but it's mostly Asian Americans that are watching, and people are concerned about that. Have we created a little ghettoized venue here, which has just certain viewers? And I just don't know, because like in the case of Asian American literature, Like, that's one of the few areas where there's still something called Asian American, you know, Asian American literature to the publishing company. They will actually publish a book which is Asian American literature, and that's because there's a niche market for Asian American literature, because there's a ton of college students who are Asian American, and whether they think so or not, their teachers think, oh, I better get some Asian American book to put there, you know, and offer to my reading and composition class. So there's a kind of a ready-built market right now, anyway, for Asian American books, even though there isn't that for a lot of other things like films or art, visual art, something like that. So it is really up for grabs. I can't say. I'm hoping that, as said in that video, that Hollywood will kind of lose its monopolizing grasp, and then there'll be a sort of heterotopia of audiences worldwide that will keep on doing things that will force Hollywood to change. Because if Christine Gambino does her thing all the time and there are 1 million people hitting it or 500,000 people hitting it, I don't see how Hollywood can remain totally unaware of the kind of thing that she's doing, you know, or that some Asian American is doing. But I don't think any of us can predict what the outcome will be.
And there have been really great web series that have gotten TV deals because of there are big stars like Lisa Kudrow, for example, who couldn't get her show greenlit, so she did it online, called Web Therapy. Once they saw the huge audience they had, they put it on Showtime, you know, and she's a huge star, you know.
But then look what happened to Tila Tequila.
But that, okay, I'm not going to put Tila Tequila.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Elaine.
I can't even, but this is, I'm talking, yeah, Lisa Kudrow, who's like an actress and very respected and amazing and couldn't have been on a bigger show than Friends, couldn't get her own show, you know, get onto television. So she did it herself, she put it on Web Therapy, and now it's going to be on Showtime. You know, after years of showing them, look at the audience I have, look at the content that I've produced, you know. So, and I could give you 10 other examples, because it does happen, you know, and sometimes you just have to take the matters into your own hands. And by the way, sometimes it's a great thing, because then you actually have control, because when you're doing TV shows and you're right out of the gates, there's a ton of people giving you notes, and it doesn't even end up becoming your vision, and then it gets canceled two episodes in, and you don't know what happened.
I have 2 words, Jimmy Wong. Okay, his response to Alexandra Wallace was phenomenal, and I think that taking the empowered words above Ching Chong Ling Long was awesome. In the back.
Elaine, when you were doing research for this documentary and the last one, I'm curious if you did any research into the amount of Asian American women or just Asian American writers, because I think that the root problem comes from writing and the lack of writers, and I'm curious if you can talk to what your research found and if there was a difference between your first documentary and your second and the numbers.
Well, you know, in the first documentary, the director told us that if we had Asian women as the spokespeople in the film, nobody would pay attention because they would think we were not being objective. So you might notice one annoying aspect of that film is that all the people who say anything analytical or interpretive are men. And the women just say, oh, I just felt like this or I felt like that. And the men all pontificate about the social context and history. So that was one thing. It wasn't that there were no women who could have said something analytical. We were just told that that's what we should do then. But this time, I couldn't find that many Asian women doing things on the internet. I found a lot of guys, but I didn't find a lot of women. That's one thing. And the other thing is, there are more Asian male, I think there are more Asian male directors than Asian female directors too. So there is a little bit of a paucity of women in general as directors, I think, or in general doing things on the internet compared to men. And for Asian women, it's the same. So yeah, that's an issue. I think it's getting a little bit better, I hope. And I really do hope that Alice Wu makes another film. You know, too. She's so great, you know, and you know her story, right? That it took her 5 years to do that film. Do you know her story? She was an engineer for Microsoft, and she was getting really great pay, but she really wanted to make a film. And so she saved money to live for 5 years without working there, and then she tried to make that film. But like she says there very nicely, I think they were ready to make a film if she would just make the characters not Chinese, not speak Chinese, and be straight. Then we'll make the film. What a great story. But that would have totally changed it into something else. And so she stuck to her guns and eventually did make the film towards the end of the 5 years when her money was running out. She's so great, but I don't know how well the film did in the market. I think it did well in rentals. But, you know, it's very hard once you do a film to get it out there, showing in theaters. So I don't know what the answer to it is. I want to see her and other Asian American women filmmakers really get an opportunity to make those great films that are in their head or on their writing pad. Sit down. Yes?
Quick question, first of all. Hi, Sheetal. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for being here. Do you feel or do you think that in order to really get Asian American women in films or just Asian American films out there having to go the same path similar to what Tyler Perry did for the African American community, kind of having to bankroll their own and put their own personal money or do whatever they need to do, get their own movie studios? Do you think that that's going to be the only way to really get it out there for people to really get a bite out of it?
I feel like getting a movie made is a miracle. It really is. And getting it, I mean, every step of it, it's really, like, for anyone who's made a movie, it feels like an impossible feat. And when it actually happens, you can't believe it's actually happening. There are so many ways to get a movie funded and made. I don't know, that could be one way, but I don't think it's the only way. Sheetal, thoughts?
I mean, I think all of the above. I mean, I don't think there's any harm in that. I think it'd be great, and I also think it'd be great to, I mean, I think any opportunity we can have, we should be exploring. And I think that the Tyler Perry story comes from the fact that he wanted to tell his stories. He was a writer and he was a director, and he wanted to tell and have control over it. There's another, you know, even Kevin Smith, right? The director just has a movie come out just right now called Red State. He decided to distribute it himself. He had plenty of studios that were interested in doing it, and he very frankly said to go through that system and to have it released and distributed that way when it takes this much money and you spend a minimum of this on a budget to make the money back, he didn't want to do it. He's like, I made the movie for $4 million and I'd like to make at least that, and I will have a much better chance of doing that without having to deal with studio costs and P&A and all the stuff that comes along with a major theatrical release. And so he wanted the control over what he wanted to put out there for it. So there's lots of filmmakers. I mean, I could go on and on about people that are doing it their own way. I think the most important thing is, if you have a story to tell, and you want to write it, and you want to produce it, and you want to direct it, you can. It's a very difficult thing, but it's worth doing. But if you want to stick to your guns and have control over it, you'll find the best way to get that story out there. And if that means doing it yourself or having a great studio deal, there's pros and cons to all of that. But in the meantime, if you want to create your own studio with your own content, go for it. Hell yeah. I mean, why not? You know, I think all of those things, I would hope to get to a point where there's so much content and so many of us doing things that would be our problem. That would be fantastic.
I feel so empowered. I'm really sorry. I really do. I feel like I should change professions. I wanted to thank all of you for coming out today. I know you had a choice, but you came to our panel, and I'd like to thank first Professor Kim for her part 2. Chen, our actor extraordinaire, and Sheetal as well, our trailblazers. So thank you for coming out, and make sure you see Surrogate Valentine. Don't you have like a text thing as well?
Oh yes, at the screening tomorrow. This is very strange for me a little bit, but right before Surrogate Valentine is a film that my husband and I made.
Is he here?
He is. He's right over there.
Hey.
It's tonight, and it's going to play right before Surrogate Valentine.
Can we squeeze in one more question? Can we have an extra question, possibly?
I think they need the theater, but
If you have a question, you can ask one of us.
I'm getting sort of an intuitive sense that we're touching on a very important subject, and that is, I'm not very well versed, but it seems like the Hollywood record labels suffered a very bad fate with the free downloading on the internet. And someone mentioned YouTube. and it destroyed the record industry in the United States. And I'm wondering if film is moving in a similar direction, and whether or not Hollywood studios are going to suffer a similar outcome.
Well, I will say just quickly, because I know we have to get out of here. I mean, it's a big question. Number one, though, even on the same theme of YouTube, please do not pirate movies. Please, I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like, I know at least half of us in here are guilty of it. And it really is. It is a disaster, especially for any filmmaker, a small filmmaker. There's no way for us to make more movies. You know, do not copy them. Do not pirate them. Don't put them on the internet. And because there are other ways of doing it. There are great things. Like now YouTube are doing now, they're actually producing their own content. And I think that is the way that YouTube would do their own kind of web stuff, if that answers your question. Because there's a Hulu.com, which have actual deals with networks to rebroadcast their stuff that actually pays what it should pay, but then you can get it for free. There's, you know, like the Netflix has it, the Hulu has it, YouTube is now doing it. So I think it's about making sure that the content and the deal that you make with the people is respectful to the fact that this is not something that should be getting for free.
But there is that potential, though.
Well, there's always a potential for it, but it's up to us to make sure that we're really, I mean, it's really up to us to do the right thing. It's in our own hands, so let's all do that.
Thank you. Just like buy new books, don't buy used. Okay? That's from the academic standpoint. Right, Elaine?